Now what? Akitsugu Domoto is here. I am a translator in Japan, and I had something shocking or ridiculous, which is some localizers do their job for Japanese anime and tweak the translations by including their own belief or ideology, which is not expressed in the content at all. Although it will be obvious to many why this does matter, let me delve into this issue as a translator. Translators may tweak the outcome when the source is not clear enough or difficult for the audience to understand instinctively or culturally. For example, when the source contains a proverb in Japan, we replace that with the counterpart in English and vice versa. Therefore, under the right circumstances, we may make some changes to the expression. I myself believe that a translation is a variation of the source content, and it is a good thing to have some variations of translation regarding one source per se. I believe that the audience should be able to choose their favorite version of the translation by their favorite translator. So, what makes this case wrong? The purpose of localization or adaptation regarding translation is to make the expression or original intent of the source clearer. And in many cases, the audience trusts the translation. In other words, they believe that the translation is, if not perfectly, at least properly based on the source, and that the counterpart of the expression in the translated version should be in the source. So when a translator or localizer expresses their personal ideology in their translation, the audience will believe that ideology is expressed also in the source content. Thus, they misunderstand the message. Any attempt to translate which ends up being a misunderstanding is a poor translation, or even not a translation, but a plagiarism. Unfortunately, there are some localizers who do such a job, and one of them claims that her translation is not for those who want to enjoy the original content as it is. Yes, it is understandable and not wrong per se that we have more than one variation, one for those who love the original content and other for those who enjoy an adaptation or interpretation by the translator. However, as I said, in many cases, translators are trusted without any doubt. Therefore, when the audience consumes a variation, including a personal expression of a translator, it's iffy whether they know it is not for them. Also, if a translation is officially used on a platform like Netflix or Hulu, the audience assumes that the translation is granted by the author, which is not always the case. Thus, I believe translators have to consider their position with care. A bold adaptation to the expression is only allowed when there is a classic version to compare with. For example, I translate many classic literatures like the Alice's Adventure in Wonderland, and I translated it with a tweak to make the narrative from the first-person perspective. However, if I had been the first translator of Alice in Wonderland, this adaptation wouldn't have been welcomed or allowed. What made my translation an acceptable variation needs other translations before me. In this sense, a bold adaptation is always for a niche. Therefore, the attitude of the translators or localizers in this case is totally uncalled for. I believe that translators can offer the value of alternative translations or bold adaptation as a variation of the content to share. That value will not be compromised by the usage of machine translation, because I believe that there will be some people who love the variation of translation made by human beings in the future, as there are many people who love works made by artisans now. However, in order to convince people that we have the value to offer, we have to be trustworthy. What can we do to be trustworthy? Of course, it depends, and we have to think about it seriously and diligently. But one thing is obvious. It is not plagiarism to express a personal opinion under the skin of the popularity of the source content.